My husband spends every free moment with his friends but can't spare time for me. When I brought it up, he said I was overreacting and needed to let him have his fun. When I married him, I thought I was marrying my best friend. We used to spend hours talking about everything and nothing, dreaming about the future we'd build together. He wasn't just my husband, he was my partner, my confidant, the person who made me feel seen. Somewhere along the way, though, that changed. Now, I feel like I'm sharing him with a crowd of people who always seem to come first. And no matter how much I try to convince myself otherwise, the gap between us keeps growing. I didn't realize how wide that gap had become until last Friday night. I'd spent the day working, juggling back-to-back meetings, and rushing to get home on time to prepare something special for our 5th anniversary. It wasn't going to be extravagant, just a quiet dinner at home, candles, wine, and the kind of conversation we hadn't had in far too long. I'd even picked up his favorite dessert, the one he always joked was better than anything else in the world. But as the hours ticked by, the table I'd set so carefully remained untouched. The candles melted into pools of wax, the wine bottle sat unopened, and my phone stayed maddeningly silent. He didn't call. He didn't text. By the time he walked through the door, it was past 11. He was laughing, his voice carrying the easy joy of someone who had spent the evening exactly where he wanted to be. He stopped short when he saw me sitting at the dining table, the remnants of my effort scattered around me like a forgotten promise. "Oh," he said, his smile fading. "What's all this?" I didn't answer right away. Instead, I just looked at him, at the faint smudge of frosting on his sleeve, at the light in his eyes that had nothing to do with me. "It was supposed to be our anniversary dinner," I said finally, my voice quieter than I intended. His face twisted in confusion, then dawning realization. "Oh, no. Babe, I'm so sorry. I completely forgot." I waited for more, an explanation, an apology that felt genuine, something to bridge the growing distance between us. But all I got was a shrug and a quick excuse. "Jake's party was tonight, and I've been so busy planning it. You know how much he's been going through lately." Jake. His best friend. The person who seemed to get all the thought and energy my husband used to reserve for me. I tried to swallow the lump in my throat, but it refused to budge. "You remembered Jake's party," I said, my voice trembling. "You planned it for weeks. But you forgot our anniversary?" "Don't make this a big deal," he said, sighing as if I were the one being unreasonable. "I'll make it up to you. We'll go out tomorrow, okay?" But it wasn't okay. It wasn't just about the anniversary, it was about the pattern, the way I'd become an afterthought in my own marriage. The next morning, I woke up before he did, my mind racing with all the things I wanted to say but couldn't. The truth was, this wasn't new. I'd been feeling it for months, the nights he spent with his friends instead of with me, the weekends I spent alone while he golfed or watched the game, the way his phone buzzed with messages from them while our conversations dwindled into silence. When he finally came into the kitchen, I tried to talk to him. I told him how I felt invisible, how I missed the way we used to be, how much it hurt to always come second. He listened, or at least he pretended to. But when I was done, all he said was, "You're overreacting. I need time with my friends too, you know. You should be more supportive." Supportive. That word stuck in my mind all day, replaying like a broken record. Was I being unsupportive? Was I expecting too much? Or was it fair to want to feel like a priority in my own marriage? That evening, as I sat alone on the couch while he laughed at something on his phone, I realized something I hadn't wanted to admit. I was tired of trying to fix something he didn't even see as broken. Our marriage wasn't just strained, it was slipping away. And if he couldn't see that, I wasn't sure how much longer I could hold on. For the first time in years, I began to wonder if I could really do this, if I could keep living in the shadow of his friendships, hoping for scraps of the man I'd once thought was mine. The morning after our anniversary debacle, I woke up to the sound of laughter. It was coming from the living room, where my husband sat with his phone, chuckling at something on his group chat. The same group chat that seemed to dominate every moment of his free time. I watched him for a moment, wondering if he'd even noticed how distant we'd become. If he cared. If he missed me the way I missed him. But as I walked into the room, his laughter died, replaced by the kind of distracted indifference I'd grown used to. "Morning," he said, not looking up from his screen. "Morning," I replied, though my tone carried a weight I knew he'd ignore. The day stretched out in its usual rhythm, me running errands and tidying up, him glued to his phone or stepping out for hours at a time. He didn't say where he was going, but I didn't need to ask. It was always the same: golf with Jake, a beer with the guys, or some last-minute hangout he'd failed to mention earlier. By the time he got home, the sun was setting, and I was finishing dinner. He walked in with the same carefree energy he always had after spending time with them, his mood light and his smile easy. "How was your day?" I asked, trying to sound neutral. "Good," he said, grabbing a plate without sitting down. "Jake and I played a couple of rounds, then grabbed lunch. He's really going through it right now, you know? Just trying to be there for him." There it was again, Jake. I tried not to let it bother me, but the words were out before I could stop them. "It feels like you're always being there for Jake, but when was the last time you were there for me?" He paused mid-bite, his brow furrowing. "What's that supposed to mean?" "It means I'm tired of feeling like I come second," I said, my voice trembling. "You drop everything for your friends, but when I need you, you're too busy or too distracted. Do you even see how that makes me feel?" He sighed, setting his plate down. "Look, I'm not ignoring you, okay? But I can't just abandon my friends. Jake's been my best friend for years. He needs me right now. And I don't?" I asked, my voice breaking. His expression softened for a moment, but then he shook his head. "This isn't a competition, you know. You've got to stop taking it so personally. I'm allowed to have a life outside of us." That word, competition, lodged itself in my chest like a thorn. Was that what he thought this was? A battle for his attention? I didn't respond. I couldn't. Instead, I cleaned up in silence while he retreated to the couch, phone in hand, laughing at some new meme his friends had sent. Later that night, as I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, I thought about the man I'd married. The one who used to bring me flowers for no reason, who used to call me his best friend. Somewhere along the line, that version of him had disappeared, replaced by someone who seemed to save the best parts of himself for everyone but me. I wanted to believe things could go back to the way they were. That if I just tried harder or gave him more space, he'd come around. But deep down, I knew that wasn't true. This wasn't just about his friends. It was about the choices he was making, the ones that left me feeling invisible, unimportant, and utterly alone. And as much as I wanted to fix things, I was starting to wonder if I was the only one who cared enough to try. That realization stayed with me as I drifted off to sleep, the sound of his laughter from the living room echoing in my ears like a haunting refrain. I knew I couldn't keep living like this, but I didn't know what to do next. All I knew was that something had to change, because I couldn't keep giving my all to someone who seemed to save his best for everyone else. A week after our anniversary, I found myself sitting alone at the kitchen table again. This time, it wasn't a special occasion I was mourning, it was the slow erosion of my own happiness. I had tried to brush it off, to convince myself I was being dramatic. After all, he wasn't a bad husband. He wasn't abusive or cruel. He just wasn't present. And somehow, that hurt even more. That night, as he sat on the couch laughing at his phone, I decided to check it. I wasn't proud of the impulse, but my gut was screaming at me, and I needed to know. I waited until he fell asleep, his phone still clutched loosely in his hand. My heart pounded as I unlocked it, my fingers trembling with a mix of guilt and desperation. What I found wasn't infidelity, not in the traditional sense. But it still felt like a betrayal. His group chat with his friends was filled with plans, jokes, and updates. In one thread, they were planning a weekend trip, a trip he hadn't mentioned to me. In another, he was complaining about how clingy I'd been lately. "Yeah, she's been on my case about a US time or whatever," one of his messages read. "I don't get it. I need space too. She's just overthinking everything." The words blurred as tears filled my eyes. Overthinking. Clingy. Was that how he saw me? I kept scrolling, my stomach twisting with every message. They talked about their golf games, their nights out, their inside jokes. It was like he lived an entirely separate life, one where I was little more than a footnote. I locked the phone and put it back on the nightstand, my chest heavy with emotions I couldn't even name. The next morning, I confronted him. "Are you planning a trip with your friends?" I asked as he poured his coffee. He froze for a moment, then shrugged. "Yeah, it's not a big deal. Just a weekend thing." "Why didn't you tell me?" "I was going to," he said, his tone defensive. "I just didn't think it mattered." "Didn't think it mattered?" I repeated, my voice rising. "You're making plans without me, complaining about me to your friends, and acting like I'm some kind of burden. How am I supposed to feel about that?" His face hardened. "You're blowing this out of proportion. I need time with my friends, okay? That doesn't mean I don't care about you." "But you don't show it," I snapped. "You don't even try anymore. You spend all your energy on them and I get the leftovers, if I get anything at all." He didn't have an answer for that. Instead, he just shook his head and muttered, "I can't do this right now," before walking out the door. I stood there, my chest heaving with anger and frustration, wondering how we'd gotten here. How the man I'd once trusted with my heart could make me feel so small. That night, as I sat in bed alone, I realized something I hadn't wanted to admit. I couldn't keep sacrificing myself to support someone who wouldn't meet me halfway. And for the first time, I began to wonder if love was enough to save us, or if I was finally ready to save myself instead. The morning after our argument, the house felt colder than usual. He left early, mumbling something about meeting Jake for breakfast. I didn't bother to ask when he'd be back. As I sipped my coffee, I scrolled through social media out of habit. That's when I saw it, a picture of him and his friends, posted by Jake. They were at a restaurant, laughing over plates of food. The caption read, "Boys' breakfast." Nothing like starting the day with the real MVPs. Real MVPs. The word stung in a way I hadn't expected. My husband, the man I had supported through thick and thin, was sitting across from his friends, grinning like he didn't have a care in the world. Meanwhile, I was at home, trying to piece together the broken parts of our marriage by myself. That was the moment I decided I couldn't keep living like this. When he came home later that afternoon, I was waiting for him. He looked surprised to see me standing by the door, my arms crossed and a suitcase by my side. "What's going on?" he asked, his brow furrowing. "I need a break," I said, my voice steady but firm. "From this. From you. From feeling like I'm the only one fighting for us." He blinked, caught off guard. "You're leaving?" "I don't know if it's forever," I admitted. "But I can't keep pouring myself into a marriage where I feel invisible. I need time to figure out what I want, and if this is worth saving." His face shifted, a mix of confusion and panic. "Come on, don't do this. You're just upset. We can work through this." "Can we?" I asked, my voice breaking for the first time. "Because I've been trying, and all I get in return is excuses and indifference. I deserve more than that. And until you can see that, I can't stay." He opened his mouth to argue, but no words came out. For the first time, he looked genuinely unsure of himself. I picked up my suitcase and walked out the door, my heart pounding with a mix of fear and liberation. As I drove away, I felt a strange sense of clarity. I didn't know what the future held, but I knew one thing for certain: I was done settling for less than I deserved. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was finally choosing myself.